y'all, this is Miss Roton again, and my son Robbie, who's working our camera today. We are about to do our Frog Prince packet. So it looks like this, and this is a classic story by the Brothers Grimm, classic fairy tale. That means it's gonna have magic in it. We know that this story is a story that's another story really famous. You probably know this as The Princess and the Frog. Thank you. So here are our vocabulary words for this week. We've got handsome, that's like good looking, but not necessarily in a girly kind of way. We've got rage, which is really big anger. We've got bridegroom, which is a compound word made out of bride and groom. On a wedding day, we've got the bride and the bridegroom. That's the guy marrying the bride. We've got plumes. That's a long curly feather. Usually they come from like ostriches. Like think about ostrich feathers. But in this story, you're not going to see any ostriches, but people would wear long curly plumes on their hats. Outstretched. This is another compound word made out of out and stretch, like to stretch out your hands. My fingers are outstretched. And we've got insists. To insist is to try and make someone do what you're telling them to. So like if I hold the door open for you and you say, oh no, after you, I insist, you're going to try and make me go first. So here are our Pictionary pictures for this week. Let's see. Can anybody guess? Look, the arrows are pointing at the dude. Robbie, what do you think this is?
The bridegroom.
The bridegroom. And on this side, oh look, a hat with a long curling feather. Do you remember what we call the long curling feather,
Yes.
Robbie?
A plume.
A plume. Very good.
Hey, that's on moose too.
Oh, are there plumes on moose too?
Yeah, they say
A plume. Okay, so I am going to read you this story. Please follow along with me while I'm reading. In old times, when you could still wish for what you wanted, there lived a king whose daughters were all handsome. The youngest was so beautiful that the sun himself, who has seen so much, wondered at her beauty. Near the royal castle there was a great dark wood, and in the wood, under an old linden tree, was a well. When the day was hot and the king's daughter used to go into the wood and sit by the cool well. If the time passed slowly, she took her golden ball, threw it up in the air, and caught it again. This was her favorite game. We're turning our page. One day the golden ball did not fall back to her outstretched hand, but fell to the ground near the edge of the well and bounced in.
outstretched.
Robbie caught one of her vocabulary words. The king's daughter followed it with her eyes as it sank, but the well was deep, so deep that she could not see the bottom. Then she began to weep, and she wept and wept as if her heart...
In the beginning there was handsome.
Very good, please don't interrupt again. Then she began to weep, and she wept and wept as if her heart would break. As she was weeping, she heard a voice calling, "What's the matter, king's daughter? Your tears break my heart." She looked to see where the voice came from, but saw only a frog stretching his fat, ugly head out of the water. "Oh, is it you, old frog?" she said. "I am weeping because my golden ball fell into the well." "Shh, don't cry. I'll try to help you. But first, what will you give me if I bring your ball back?" "Whatever you like, dear frog," she said. "My clothes, my pearls and jewels, or even the gold crown I am wearing." "Your clothes and pearls and jewels and your crown of gold are not for me," the frog answered. "But if you would love me and be my friend, let me come and play with you. Let me sit by you at the table and eat from your plate and drink from your cup. Let me sleep in your little bed. If you promise me all this, then I will bring back your golden ball." As soon as she had given her promise to do all that the frog wanted, he disappeared under the water. Then, after a while, he came up with the ball in his mouth and threw it on the grass. The king's daughter was so happy to see her pretty plaything again that she picked it up and ran off with it. "Wait, wait," called the frog. "Take me with you. I can't run as fast his quack, quack, quacking, that's a really interesting onomatopoeia, as loud as he could, she would not listen. She hurried home and very soon forgot all about the poor frog. The next day, when the king's daughter was sitting at the table with the king, and all the court was eating from her little gold plate, something came plitch, platch, plitch, platch.
All the court was eating her little gold plate.
Good question. The way I messed up that sentence made it sound confusing, huh? That's how I checked. I recognize I made a mistake when I checked my understanding.
But you said all of the court ate from their gold plate, and then you said all of the court ate off of her gold plate.
Well, let me correct it. I'll read it the right way this time. The next day, when the king's daughter was sitting at the table with the king and all the court, and was eating from her little gold plate, something came plitch, platch, up the marble steps. Then there came a knocking at the door and a cry, "King's youngest daughter, let me in!" She got up and ran to see who it could be. When she opened the door, she saw the frog sitting there. She quickly shut the door and went back to her place at the table, feeling very frightened. The king noticed how quickly her heart was beating and said, "My child, why are you afraid? Is there a giant standing at the door ready to carry you off?" "Oh, no," she answered. It's not a giant, but a horrible frog." "What does the frog want?" "Oh, dear father," she answered, "when I was sitting by the well yesterday, playing with my golden ball, it fell into the well. While I was crying over the loss of it, the frog came and got it for me. Only because he insisted, I promised that he could play with me and be my friend, but I never thought he could leave the water. Now he's outside the door and he wants to come in and play with me and to eat with me." Turning the page. And then they all heard the frog knocking a second time, and he cried, "King's youngest daughter, let me in! What has been your promise to me, king's youngest daughter? Now open to me!" Then the king said, "You must keep your word if you have promised. Go now and let him in." She went and opened the door, and the frog hopped in, following at her heels until she reached her chair. Then he stopped and cried, "Lift me up to sit by you." But she waited until the king ordered her. When the frog was on the chair, When the frog was on the chair, he wanted to get on the table. And there he sat and said, "Now push your little golden plate a bit nearer so that we can eat together." And so she did, but everyone could see how unwilling she was. The frog ate heartily, that means with a really good appetite, but every bite seemed to stick in the king's daughter's throat. At last he said, "I've had enough. Carry me to your room and make ready your bed so we can lie down to sleep." Then the king's daughter began to cry and was afraid of the cold frog who wanted to sleep in her pretty clean bed. The king grew angry with her and said, "What you promised is in time of need you must now carry out." So she picked up the frog with 2 fingers and carried him upstairs and put him in a corner. And then when she was lying in bed, he crept up to her saying, "I am tired and want to sleep. Let me up or I shall tell your father." She was beside herself with rage, picked him up and threw him against the wall, crying, "Now will you be quiet, you horrid frog!" But when he fell, he was no longer a frog, but a prince with beautiful, friendly eyes. And with her father's consent, they became bride and bridegroom. Oh, you found the word rage? Yes. He told her how a wicked witch had bewitched him, and that no one but her could have saved him from being a frog all his life. Yes, bridegroom, thank you. They fell asleep. The next morning, when the sun awoke them, a carriage came, drawn by 8 white horses with white plumes on their heads, and with a golden harness. Behind the carriage was Faithful Henry, the prince's servant. Faithful Henry had been so troubled when his master was turned into a frog that he had had to wear 3 iron bands over his heart to keep it from breaking. Faithful Henry helped the king's youngest daughter and prince into the carriage. and got up behind to drive them to their kingdom. Can you drink some water? He was full of joy that his master had been saved. When they had gone part of the way, the prince heard something crackling. He turned around and cried, "Isn't something breaking?" Again and once again the prince thought he heard the same sound. "They're the bands round my heart, that to lessen its ache, when I grieved for your sake, I bound round my heart." It was the breaking of the 3 bands from faithful Henry's heart, because he was now so happy. Okay, so at the bottom of this page, you'll see some questions you can answer with your parents about this story. I would like you to read this story again on your own and then talk about these questions with your family. Here are some things I want you to think about while you're reading it the second time. First of all, what do you think about the way the princess behaves? She does give the frog her word, and then she breaks it. Was the king right to make her stick to her word? Or should they have respected that the princess changed her mind? Which one is more important?
King.
You think the king was right to make her honor her promise? Keeping your promises is very important. The second thing I want you to think about is this prince who chooses to marry the princess after she throws him at a wall. I think that's a very strange ending. Yeah. Would you want to marry someone who had treated you the way the princess treats the frog?
No. No.
It's a very interesting question. So as you're reading this, I want you to think about the choices the different characters make and decide who you think is right and wrong. Who do you think are being kind and who do you think is not?
I think the king and the frog are being kind, and the princess does not have good choices and is not being kind.
Okay, so you know what Robbie thinks. I want to know what you think. You can email me your answer or comment on this video on Facebook, or you can comment on this YouTube video. The next thing in your packet is the quiz. If you are at school with me, this would be the quiz, but you can just use it as a practice sheet. You can circle the correct vocabulary word that goes in each blank. You can answer the questions about the story. And then here you have another version of the Princess and the Frog that you can read and answer some questions about. Actually, instead of questions, on the back, it is make an advertisement slogan on the front of the kissing booth. An advertisement slogan is like a saying to make people come and want to buy your product or use your service. So what could you write on here to make people come want to get a smooch? On this video, instead of linking a bunch of other versions of the Frog Prince, I'm going to invite you to go watch Disney's The Princess and the Frog, and I'd love for you to tell me how it is like the original Brothers Grimm fairy tale and how it is different. All right? I hope you have a wonderful week, and I hope you enjoyed this slightly zanier version of our video lesson today. Robbie, can you turn off the camera, please?
Cameraman on it! Was that funny?
Turn off the video now.